founders, I would just like to... Can you hear the sound? Yeah, okay. I would just like to tell you about their upcoming events. On Thursday, there will be a lecture about international law from Ove Breen, and this will be in the University building at 7:15 p.m. Now let's welcome Anders Persson with a warm applause.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. When you invite an American to an academic lecture like this, she or he will always start by cracking a joke. When you invite an Asian, she or he will always start by apologizing for something like that. Or almost hitting you or something like that. When you invite a Swede to an academic setting like this, the Swede will always start by thanking a lot of people that made the lecture possible. So in that tradition, I'm honored and grateful to the Uppsala Association for Foreign Affairs, and to you and to Ellen for inviting me here. It's a pleasure. It won't be a normal lecture with a PowerPoint. I follow the trend in America of not using PowerPoint that much. There's actually an expression now going around. It's called death by PowerPoint, that you try to kill your students by exposing them too much to PowerPoints. America's leading political commentator, his name is Fareed Zakaria of CNN. He says that people with PowerPoints rarely have any power and never makes any points. It falls under the category of Americans starting off the lecture with really bad jokes. Let's think about this for a second. You know, in America today, there's a black man as president. He might be replaced by a woman in the next election. The leading political commentator is a Muslim, or is a Christian. Takes a while before we get there in Western Europe. 100 years maybe before we in Sweden are there. I am a political scientist. I had my PhD from Lund. I wrote about the role of the European Union in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I have written 2 other books about the conflict. Don't buy them, you can download them instead. So, it's a myth among students that their teachers make a lot of money on books. Don't believe it for a second. It's not true. Nobody is buying my books, for example. I'm now working as a lecturer and researcher in Växjö, in Gothenburg, teaching a variety of courses, mostly related to Middle East and peace and conflict issues. I see myself as 80% of a political scientist. That means 100 pages of theory in my book. I see myself as 10% anthropologist. It means that I go to the places I write about. I've been to the Middle East many times. I lived there when I was younger. I have met most of the sites involved. I've been in Gaza, meeting Hamas. I've been in Hezbollah, meeting Hezbollah in Lebanon, and meeting the Palestinian Israeli Jihad and the radical settlers many times. I met ISIS as well. They cut off my arm in Iraq. No, I'm lying here. I was born like this. I can show it to you now. Because I move a bit straight since I don't have my left arm. It was a joke. But when I'm drunk, I will tell you horrible stories of what happened to me. But I was born like that. I'm also 10% of a historian. I went into this with a strong sense that history matters. History matters, you know. Many people in the Middle East, they believe that the Crusades happened yesterday. It happened 1,000 years ago, but it's living memory. In Israel, the Holocaust is in the news every day. Every day. So history is alive in a way that is not here in Europe. I also lecture regularly for pro-Israeli and Jewish organizations and for pro-Palestinian/Muslim organizations everywhere. I've been quite a few times in the Jewish community in Malmö. They're having a very tough time at the moment. When you go there and you sit and give a lecture there, it's like the room is like a bulletproof room, you know, below the surface, and with huge controls and security and all of that. And that is a tragedy today, regardless of what you think about conflict. It is a tragedy that this is This is the situation. I usually start off my lectures by showing a little piece of history. Anyone knows what this is? It's a medal, I can give you that later. Nobody have ever seen this before? No. I told you that history matters. This is the victory medal from the First World War. It looks like this. On the back it says the Great War for Civilization. It was a neo-colonial inscription, to be sure. This medal was made in 9 million copies. Every color here on the ribbon marks one of the victorious countries. A bunch of European countries and their colonies. Apparently, since this medal was made in 9 million copies, or 11 million copies actually, there were many victories of the First World War. But there were also many losers, and the people of the Middle East were among the losers. Before the First World War, in the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled this area here, the Palestine, and what we now call Israel and Palestine. The Ottoman Empire was called the sick man of Europe because it was weak politically, economically, and militarily. So in European capitals, plans were made up to colonialize its territories. During the First World War in 1916, the British and the French drew up the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement. Sykes and Picot were two high-level officials in the government in these two countries. And the plan was to divide up large parts of the Middle East in French and British spheres of influence. If you spend your evenings watching ISIS propaganda videos, I do that. One of the main movies put out last year is called Flames of War. You can see it online, it's very brutal. They refer to the Sykes-Picot Agreement as the black pages of history. And there is actually one of the ISIS guys who, in that video, is destroying that war, smashing it up. The peace at Versailles after the First World War was supposed to be the peace to end all wars. But today, many people believe that it was a peace to end all peace. If you want to read the best book about the creation of the modern Middle East, it's David Fromkin's A Peace to End All Peace, The Fall of the Ottoman Empire, and the creation of the modern Middle East. After the war, in a very short space of time, in about 18 months, the victorious powers divided up their lands of their former enemies. And in 1.5 years, they created the borders of Northern Ireland, Yugoslavia, and also the Middle East. And these people living in these areas, they have had a very tough 100 years, to put it mildly. What we see today with the growth of ISIS is literally the unraveling of these Sykes-Picot borders. ISIS is doing that right now. Remember one thing, 15 years ago, these global jihadists were stuck in South Asia, in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. Now they are in the heart of the Middle East. That is an epic development. Truly an epic development. Al-Qaeda's leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, the guy who took over when Bin Laden was killed, he wrote a book 15 years ago when the Taliban regime fell in 2001. It's called Knights under the Prophet's Banner, Knights under the Prophet's Banner, and Knights with a K, Knights under the Prophet's Banner. And in that book, he says that the strategic objective for Al-Qaeda over the foreseeable future, it means the period we're living in today, the strategic objective is to create a new base for the Holy War. Al-Qaeda, Al-Jihad means the base for the Holy War. somewhere in the Middle East. ISIS has done that. Again, truly an epic development. Even though ISIS and Al-Qaeda at present are deadly enemies. After the First World War, 10 million German speakers found themselves outside of Germany's borders. That was one reason, not the only one, but one reason why Hitler started the Second World War, to get Lebensraum, living space for these people. Today, just think about it. This is not related to the Middle East, but take it with you. 25 million Russian-speaking people are living outside Russia's border. No doubt a major source of instability for the future. After the First World War, Palestine became a British mandate under the League of Nations. France got a similar mandate for Syria and Lebanon. If we move forward to the Second World War, we know the story of Hitler and the Nazis killing 6 million Jews. And I think Swedes are very well educated about the Holocaust. That's my opinion. I think young people have a very clear view of what happened. But it's worth pointing out a few things about the Second World War. The Holocaust was actually only a rather small part of Hitler's grandiose strategy. His strategy was not just to kill the Jews, but actually to colonize large parts of Central and Eastern Europe and kill tens of millions of people, not just Jews, mainly through starvation. That was his original plan. It's called Generalplan Ost. He didn't succeed in that. But his plan was to establish a border somewhere along the Ural Mountains as a border towards the barbarians of the East, Chinese and others. If you want to read about this, Timothy Schneider's Bloodlands is the best book in a single volume about the Second World War. A really, really good book. It's also another lesson of the Second World War, not very well known, is that Hitler and Stalin together killed or displaced almost all the minorities of Europe, not just the Jews. We know the story, of course, as I said, 6 million Jews were killed. 30 million Germans were ethnically cleansed back to Germany. In Czechoslovakia, or former Czechoslovakia, the president there, his name was Benz. He said, we have decided to eliminate the German problem once and for all. And they did. In Poland, Churchill had promised the Pope a clean sweep of Germans out of Poland. They did. And many other minorities were killed. Ukrainians and Poles and Yugoslavs and Italians, Hungarians, many people either killed or displaced. So what was left of Europe was ethnically homogeneous states. Many people, or some historians at least, believe, a bit politically incorrect, that this ethnic homogeneous states contributed significantly to the stability of post-war Europe. If you want to read about this, read Tony Judd's Post-War: A History of Europe since 1945. I think it's the best book about this period. He also says things that many people do not know. For example, that the majority of Germans supported the Holocaust. They were against Hitler for engaging in really stupid wars, but they supported the Holocaust. So an important point to make, because if you go to Germany today, and I believe that Germany has dealt, in general, very good with a legacy. But you read that Hitler did this, SS did this, but it has support from a lot of people. That's important, I think, to emphasize. The killing and displacement of the minorities was called the Great Sorting Out. The Great Sorting Out of people. Joshua Landis, who is the leading Syrian expert today, has written an article about this, also giving lectures on the same theme. So if you Google Joshua Landis, The Great Sorting Out on YouTube, you can see videos about this. The Great Sorting Out, is taking place in the Middle East. Killing or displacement of minorities. Everywhere. Minorities have a very tough time. It might very well be that when we look back at this in the future, we will see small ethnic homogeneous states in the Middle East. Might very well be. Timothy Snyder, by the way, is one of the leading intellectuals when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. It's well worth to take a look at what he has been writing about Putin. His ideas are that Putin is out to destroy the European Union. It's breathtaking. These are all of these people there are very serious academics, just so you know. In 1948, Israel was founded, and in that process, the Palestinian refugee problem was also created. 750,000 Palestinian refugees. It's a big debate. There has been a big debate over the past 20 years about the Palestinian refugee problem. Who is responsible and all of that. The big name here is Benny Morris, an Israeli historian. His work is the most influential, I would say. In 1967, there was another big war, the Yule War. Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, the Sinai Desert, and the Golan Heights. And since they also did one thing which is important to point out. They destroyed Gamal Abdel Nasser. Who was Gamal Abdel Nasser? Gamal Abdel Nasser was the leader of Egypt at the time. But he wasn't just the leader of Egypt, he was like a spokesperson for the whole non-aligned movement, for the Third World, for the Arab world, against what they saw as Western imperialism and colonialism. Is there a problem?
It's a bit of a noise.
Okay. People say that I breathe like Darth Vader. Anyway, Nasser was supported by the Soviet Union, who had supplied him with arms, credits, and a lot of political support. And after that war, which resulted in a massive Israeli victory, he was a broken man. And he died, and he apologized to the people of Egypt in television. But he remained president for a few years before he died. And Anwar Sadat took over after him. When he died, or when he was defeated, with him, many people would argue, died a lot of the ideas of Arab socialism and Arab nationalism, and even of secularism in some way. This was in the early 1970s when he died. It took another decade, but after he died, people began slowly to whisper, Islam is the solution. Islam is the solution. I'm going to go back to that in a moment. Anyway, Israel negotiated a peace treaty with Egypt in 1979 and in 1982. Sinai, this is Sinai here, I don't have anything to point with. This is Sinai here, was given back to Egypt, and the settlement there were dismantled. The Golan Heights, can I have something to point with? No, forget it. The Golan Heights up there, you see Damascus and a bit south. It was annexed by Israel in 1981. There were negotiations throughout the 90s. Seems that they were quite close to succeed. But nowadays, with all the chaos in Syria, I mean, there is no discussion at all about Golan Heights whatsoever. Gaza, Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005 unilaterally. Oh, thank you. Unilaterally, without any kind of agreement. They just left. And this has created a big debate in Israel today, whether that was a good decision or not. And Hamas took over in Gaza quite soon after that. You should remember one single fact here. In Gaza, 10 years ago, there were around 1.5 million Palestinians living there, and 8,000 Israeli settlers among them. And when the second Intifada erupted in 2000 and until the pullout in 2005, so approximately 5 years, Israel, the settlements in Gaza took 10,000 shooting attacks during those 5. That's an average of 5 or 6, 7 a day. So it was an unsustainable situation. And however bad the situation is today, I mean, nobody in Israel is advocating of going back to Gaza and building settlements. East Jerusalem, part of the West Bank, was annexed in 1967. Not a single country in the world, as far as I know, has either recognized the annexation of East Jerusalem or the Golan Heights. The big issue today is, of course, the West Bank. We are approaching 50 years of Israeli occupation of the West Bank. And I think it is the big discussion, of course, for whether there will be a Palestinian state or not. In the 1970s, the European Union, or its predecessor, the European Community, entered the scene. This is what I wrote about in my PhD. As usual, they didn't do much. They didn't do much except for issuing statements. So they have issued a lot of statements, and I go through them in my PhD. It is important, though, because they adapt quite soon the Palestinian narrative of the conflict. In the EC's first official statement, there was no mention of the Palestinians as a party to the conflict. That was in 1971. In 1973, EU talked about Palestinians and their legitimate rights without defining which these were. In 1977, EU or EC recognized the Palestinians as a people with a national identity and a right to a homeland. This was important. In Israel, the prime minister at the time, his name was Menachem Begin, he knew what was meant with terms like homeland. That was a term that the Zionists and Begin himself had used in their struggle to establish Israel. 1980, the EU recognized the Palestinians' right to self-determination and talks with the PLO. Again, very, very harsh reactions from Israel. In 1999, EU recognized the need for a Palestinian state without recognizing the state as such. And in 2009, Carl Bildt led the Swedish presidency in the EU to recognize, or to endorse, I should say, endorse is a better word than recognize, to endorse Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. And last year, of course, Sweden became the first EU member to recognize Palestine, a full recognition. Some EU countries have done it before they joined the Union. This was 1970s and a bit into the 80s and 90s. And, this is what I wrote about in my PhD. It's quite boring to read technical academic text. But an important fact to understand here is the late 1970s. You might wonder what happened then. Nothing happened. Everything happened. Everything. A lot of intellectuals, sociologists and others had predicted that religion would fade away. That people, everybody would become secular in modernity. How wrong they were? This period, I call it the rise of religions. Again, many people might not really know what I'm talking about. In 1977. And these three events happened in 1977, 78, 79, in all the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They are not related to each other, but they happen at the same time. In 1977, a guy named Menachem Begin was elected Prime Minister of Israel. Menachem Begin came from the right, from what is called the Likud party today. And his victory ended 3 decades of labor dominance in Israeli politics. Begin, if you know anything, I'm not going to give you a lecture about Zionism, but Zionism has 2 strands. Labor Zionism and revisionist Zionism. Labor Zionism is Ben Gurion, Golda Meir, Rabin, Peres, and Yitzhak Herzog today. Revisionist Zionism is Jabotinsky, Begin, and Netanyahu today. Somewhat of a straight line, with some ideological differences, but this is the ideological background. And with Begin's election victory, the national religious group in Israel came to power. They're called national religious. And they were much more closely allied with American Jews as compared to the Labour Party, who had close ties primarily to European Jews. In 1978, something happened for Christianity. A new pope was elected. His name was John Paul II, Johannes Paulus II. He set out to conquer the world. And again, you might think I'm crazy when I say this. But remember, the three largest Catholic countries, Brazil, Mexico, Philippines. United States is number 4, Italy number 5. A lot of the faith communities for the Catholic Church are outside of Europe. Important to mention. Many people don't know about that. So he came in and strengthened the Catholic Church in these places. We don't know much about it here in Europe. It didn't really affect us. But he was a powerful figure. Stalin once said famously about the Pope, how many divisions does he have? Military divisions. The answer is none. But the Pope, John Paul II, played his role in bringing down the communists in the Soviet Union. Ideas are very powerful here. Stalin should have known that when Lenin came to Petrograd, St. Petersburg, he came, with no divisions. Ideas are very powerful here. And ideas are very powerful in the conflict as well. The idea of Greater Israel is a very powerful idea in Israel. The idea of the caliphate and ISIS today, very powerful. 1979, of course, is the year when political Islam rises. No less than 4 major developments happened this year, which directly affect what we are seeing in the Middle East today. And of course, Begin's election victory also does that. In January 1979, revolution in Iran. Out with the Shah, in with Ayatollah Khomeini. The Shah of Iran had been one of America's closest allies, together with Israel. And President Carter, who is remembered as the president who lost Iran, Now people are speculating which countries Obama will lose. There is a whole list. Anyway, Carter had traveled to Iran the year before to celebrate the Shah's birthday. And the Shah was, of course, very corrupt. And Carter stood with him and said, this is one of my best friends. And Iran is an island of stability in the Middle East. And all of these kind of quotes. And 6 months later, or 9 months later, I think it was an island underwater. The Shah flew his own plane out of Iran. And in came the Ayatollah. This is significant because it was the first time in modern history that political Islamists came to power. And that they are Shia Muslims, of course, but it sent powerful messages to Egypt and other places that it is possible to get to power for these groups. That was January. In March 1979, the Camp David Agreement, the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt, was signed. And that radicalized part of the Egyptian opposition. And 2 years later, in 1981, one young man, his name was Khaled al-Istanbuli, killed Sadat on a military parade in Cairo. And after he killed him, he said, I shot the fellow. And of course, the Egyptian authorities, as they did last year, or in 2013, rounded up all the usual suspects. Tens of thousands of people were put in prison. Among them were many of the future leaders of Al-Qaeda. Zawahiri, for example, other people as well. There are famous videos on YouTube, both of the assassination of Sadat and of Zawahiri speaking in court on behalf of his fellow Islamists. Later, of course, Zawahiri was released from prison, traveled to Afghanistan and joined up with Bin Laden and others. If you look, for example, at the FBI's list of most wanted terrorists that was released after 9/11, most of the people there are from Egypt. And these are people who were locked up and brutally tortured during the 80s, and then released and flown off to Afghanistan. The third major event happened in November, the siege of Mecca. Radical political Islamists took over the Grand Mosque of Mecca, the holiest site for Islam, and demanded a stricter Islamic law, which the authorities, by and large, agreed to, without saying it in public. They also had a crazy idea of a Mahdi, that one of their people was a Mahdi, like a modern day savior. It's a kind of weird concept within Islam. I won't go into it deeper. The fourth factor that happened in 1979 was, of course, the invasion of Afghanistan. So all of these things happened in 1979. Then, of course, in the 80s we see Hezbollah was founded in 1982, Hamas 1987, Al-Qaeda also in the 80s. So this period here, the late 70s, was very, very, very interesting. Add to this the opening up of China in 1978, and you have, really, really a lot of world history in the space of just a couple of years. The 80s saw a terrible war in Lebanon, very, very brutal war. Also, the outbreak of the first Intifada in Gaza in 1987. The 90s saw a lot of hope. The peace process, what is called the peace process, started in Madrid in 1991 and culminated with the signing of the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords were actually a series or a number of peace accords that were signed over a couple of years. You can read them online if you want. Again, very boring language. So this created what I call, or what everybody called, the Oslo structure. We're going to take a closer look at the West Bank now. In the Oslo Accords, the West Bank was divided up in 3 areas. Area A, B, and C. To put it simple and to make a complicated story short, Area A are the Palestinian cities. For some reason they are not on this map. Hebron, Bethlehem, Ramallah, Talkelia. I don't know why most of the cities are not on the map. Send an email to Google. Anyway, Area A was the Palestinian cities. There, the Palestinians had full civil and military control. They are about 20% of the West Bank. Area B is another 20%. Basically, the villages around the cities, to put it simply. There, the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority was set up during the Oslo Accords. It didn't exist before that. It was set up in 1994. Area B is another 20%. There, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, has civil control, but Israel has security control. And the rest, Area C, a lot of the Jordan Valley and the parts close to Israel and parts in between, 60%. Full Israeli civil and security control. Area C is where the settlements are located. Right now, there are around 120 Israeli settlements on the West Bank, and another 100 outposts. Outpost, a settlement is a settlement because it's recognized as such by the Israeli government. Outposts are not recognized as settlements. So they're what we call them small communities. And of course, the settlements is one of the major issues at the moment. There are 4 final status issues, maybe more depending on who you ask. The first is borders. What should the borders be between Israel and a future Palestinian state? That is, I think, the question which the Americans and the Palestinians themselves have given most attention in recent years. The Kerry initiative, Kerry had an initiative last year It's focused a lot on borders, on delining or outlining the borders of a future Palestinian state. It failed completely. Number 2 is settlements. That is the question the international community is pressuring Israel the most on. Which settlement might be there in a peace agreement, and then trading against land in Israel, and whether that is possible or not. There are over 300,000 Israeli settlers living in the West Bank. Some would say even more. You should know that statistics is always disputed. Always. So I outline, say, the major, the major statistics, which are often shown in Western media, but they are disputed. You should know that. There are over 300,000 Israeli settlers living in the West Bank today, and another 200,000 in East Jerusalem. So that's a bit over 500,000 altogether. And many people, including many Palestinians and Israelis as well, are openly saying now that it has gone too long and it will be impossible to unscramble the amulet and disengage. For example, if you count the figures or the money it costed to evacuate the settlements from Gaza, 8,000 settlers costed around 20 billion Swedish crowns. If you take those figures for the West Bank, you ran out of zeros on your calculator. So we're talking about major sums of money. The final status issue number 3 is Jerusalem. What to do with Jerusalem? How to share it or what to do with it, making it an international city or whatever. And the 4th question is the question of Palestinian refugees. Where they should go. Should they go to a future Palestinian state? Can some go to Israel? Can some be member or citizens of America or European Union or can they be compensated economically and so on? Israel would add another question as a final status issue. That is recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. That's something most Palestinians, including the leader Abbas, refuse to do. And the Palestinians would say that we have already compromised enough when we recognize Israel we recognize, if you think of this as historic Palestine, and historic Palestine included Jordan as well, but that was nobody's talking about Jordan anymore as a part of historic Palestine. So if you take Israel, the international recognized Israel within the 1967 borders, and Gaza and the West Bank, then Gaza is 1% of historic Palestine, the West Bank is 21, and Israel is 78. So the PDA, the Palestinian Authority, they say that we have already recognized the 78% of Israel. That's a huge compromise from our part. That's what they will say. So everything is stuck today, and almost everybody is very pessimistic about the future. We'll see if there is anyone on the panel that is optimistic in some sense. But the sentiment right now is very, very pessimistic, and there is no. I mean, that's a sad but honest assessment of the situation. So what is going on today is that many people, more and more, are believing that it's no longer possible to have a two-state solution. So what could we have instead? And that's a big debate at the moment, on all sides. Many Palestinians, of course, want what they call democratic Palestine. It means one person, one vote, and they, of course, hope that they will be the majority in the future. It's unclear, to be honest, what Hamas wants. They put out a lot of contradictory statements. One day they can say, we are ready to negotiate on the 1967 borders, and the next day they can say, we will fight Israel to the end. So it's unclear what they want. In Israel today, there's a big debate on the right of whether to annex either parts of the West Bank, Area C, or the whole of the West Bank, and giving the Palestinians their either full civil rights or partial full civil rights. If you want to read about this debate, Caroline Glick, The Israeli Solution, A One-State Plan for Peace in the Middle East, is one of the main books to read. Here in Europe, everybody is of course still clinging to the two-state solution, saying that there is no alternative. So that's where we stand in Europe. I think that my time is out now, and I'll stop there. If you want to ask me questions during the Q&A afterwards, feel free to do so. But don't ask all the questions to me, and please, sort of spread them to all. I don't want to steal the show at all from the panelists. So I would be happy. I mean, I can stay afterwards as well and take questions if you want, but I don't want to steal the show. All right. Thank you for coming out and listening to me. All right. All the panelists are welcome to step forward. All right, now it's time for a panel discussion, and I will outline some rules for the panelists and for the audience. I will ask a couple of rounds of questions to all the panelists, and we'll see what they have to say. The questions are quite open, so you can pretty much answer what you want. And after that, I think that will take around between 20 and 30 minutes. And after that, we will open up for Q&A. So there will be microphones going around in the room. Let me first introduce this very distinguished panel. It's so nice to have all of you here, and it's nice to have a young person among us. Normally, the average age of panelists is quite high, so I'm glad that at least one young person could join us today. On my far left, I have Mr. Fayek Salam. He's the chairman of the Palestinian People's Association here in Uppsala, and that's a local organization affiliated to other Palestinian organizations in Sweden. Next to him, we have Mr. Fred Ekblad. He's a human rights activist involved in different organizations. He is also, or he was, an eyewitness to the previous war in Gaza in 2014. Next to him, we have Mr. Pella Jenisha. He is the chairman of the Samfundet Sverige Israel in Uppsala. I chose the Swedish name for that. It's part of a nationwide organization with the same name. And next to him, we have Mr. Stig Dempfer. He's also a member of the same organization. And next to him, we have Mrs. Agneta Bamberg. She is a foreign affairs commentator for the Swedish radio. So that was our distinguished panel today. I'm going to ask 4 rounds of questions. The first is about personal engagement. The second is what is the main challenge right now that you identify in the conflict. Could be for war, for peace, or anything else. The third question will be in Swedish recognition of Palestine, whether the panelists thought it was a good idea. Agneta will be asked different questions because she's not part of the panel in that way. And the fourth question, if we have time, will be where the panelists believe that we and the conflict will be in 25 years. That's what we will do today. I think I'll start by asking you, Fayek, what is the main argument that you bring to the table today? What is the most important argument that you would like to convey to the audience?
First, I will thank. I thank Utrikes Politiska Förening in Uppsala to invite me here. It was too late. It was on Saturday. I didn't know about this debate before, but I did my best during these 2 days to answer your questions. My name is Faik Saleh, Chairman for Palestinian People Association in Uppsala. I was born in Lebanon. I grew up in a refugee camp. It's called Burj Shamali in the south of Lebanon. It is near Tyre city. It is about 10 kilometers from the Palestinian border. My parents were driven out from their homeland, Palestine, in 1948. They were forced to leave their houses.
So can you please say your main arguments for it?
Yeah.
I mean, I have all respect for your
No, but it is very important.
Yeah, but I mean, we need quite brief answers. So please get to
Anyway, they forced to leave Tarshiha. It is a city in the east of Akka, about 10 kilometers distance from Akka. My parents and about 800,000 Palestinians, they were forced to leave their country, Palestine, because of the Israeli massacre they exposed to it, the Zionist Haganah, Stern, Libor. They did a lot of massacre against our people in Palestine, civil people, in different cities and villages. The most famous of them was Deir Yassin. 250 people were massacred in Jerusalem, in Lubyeh, in Ikbaya, in Ramla. It is difficult to count. As a result of this massacre, people were very scared. Our people exposed to regular ethnic cleaning since 1948. They are still suffering of continuous ethnic cleaning through different types of massacre after 1948. Example, Kufr Qasim, Khan Yunis in Gaza, Sabra and Shatila 1982, Jenin 202, Gaza 2008, 2009, 2012. The latest was the last summer in Gaza 2014.
All right, I think I'll need to cross you off there because we need to give equal. We have a lot of questions here and we have equal time. So with all respect, I pass on the question to Fred. And maybe you can say a few words about your personal engagement here and what is motivating you.
Yes, I've been an asylum rights activist here in Europe for many years, and I've been meeting a lot of families from especially Gaza, but all over Palestine, and heard their stories. And I was influenced by the international solidarity movement that went to Palestine to act as a human shield for Palestinian civilians, because kids are harassed in the checkpoints in the West Bank. Farmers and fishermen are being shot at and killed every day in Gaza when they're trying to work. And I realized that we have an international privilege and also a privilege of actually being white, because Israeli has some very racist politics here. So I went to Gaza and act as the human shield for farmers and fishermen, and that's kind
When
of...
was that? When?
That's 2014, that's before the war.
Okay, and you were there during...
And I was there during the war as well, and acted as a human shield for ambulances and hospitals, all civilian that were being attacked.
Thank you. Pat, what is the most important argument that you would like to convey to the audience today?
I would like to start with a visit in the United States in the 1960 to 61, when I lived with exchange students with a Jewish family. And it taught me a little bit about how Jewish people think. In 1966, I was in Morocco, where my girlfriend lived, and gave money and support to poor Jewish people in Morocco. In 1977, we were in Jerusalem, where my mother-in-law was the organizer for the Theological Institute in Jerusalem. She lived there for 10 years, and we visited her several times. And since about 20 years now, I've been working with the with Samfundet Sverige Israel here in Uppsala.
Okay, thank you. What is motivating you, Steve? What is the driving force behind your engagement?
Well, I may be the oldest person here, but I would love to have my father, who turned 110 years old, if he would have been alive, last Wednesday, because he would love to listen to this lecture that we have heard now. His experience of Israel, the Israel issue, was in the free churches, where the preachers, they were educated in the 20s and in the 30s, and they talked about the new state of Israel that would be started. That was before 48. So I grew up with it. But then, of course, many years I didn't care about Israel at all, and I'm probably the least experienced Israel knower here in the panel. But about 10 years ago, I started to become more interested. And it was so curious to me what this little part, only 0.3% of the area that the Arab states have, is occupied by Israel. Think of it, only 0.3%. How in the world?
You mean all total Arab lands?
Yeah, I mean compared to the Arab lands. So why is it that this little part of the region is so important? So I started to become more and more interested, and it ended up with me being a part of the society also, and I'm trying to learn more and more about it, and well, that's all.
All right, thanks. I would actually like to take the opportunity to ask you, Agneta, a different question, because you have been at this since before me and Fred were born, or somewhere around there. So I think the first question I would like to ask you is that, what is continuity and what is change in this conflict? I mean, during all the years, you have been at this since 1982, if I understood correctly. So basically what I'm asking, I mean, what is new and what is not new today?
Mostly, unfortunately, it has been depressing continuity. I came in 1982 for the first time to Israel, and at that time the Begin government had been there for 5 years. They had just been re-elected in 1981, and there was at that time there were 21,000 settlers in the West Bank. And I interviewed, there was something called the Drobles Plan, named after a man called Mattathieu Drobles. It was written by the political side, in Israel, who wanted to keep the West Bank. So they made a plan for settlements. And I interviewed then the second in command for that, who written that plan, and he said, look, we have a target. We want to reach a critical mass of settlers in the West Bank, 100,000. Because if we do that, then there'll be so many and such a percentage of the total of Israeli voters that no Israeli government, independent of ideology, will ever be able to leave the West Bank. 100,000. They didn't reach that target until 1983 as they planned. But it's now, as you were saying before, over 500,000 in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. This is the continuity. There was a time, 1993, when the Oslo Agreement ceremony in Washington on the White House lawn, and I remember watching it and thinking, maybe there'll be a solution to this in my lifetime.
Were you a believer then?
Sorry?
Were you a believer back then? You said maybe. Were you a believer?
It was hard not to be a believer at that point for a very short time. Since then, the settlements have doubled. Nothing has led anywhere, and that's it, isn't it? The change is the continuity is the change, because we've now
like a deteriorating status quo.
Exactly, which becomes the change, because we've reached that situation you were talking about. Then, of course, there is the new change, which is the region, the erasing of the Sykes-Picot borders, the whole fire in the region, and this epic fact of IS. We don't know where that will lead. It has kind of pushed the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to the background.
We're talking about a lot of challenges right now and obstacles, and I mean it's quite clear that we are stuck here. So therefore, I would like to take the opportunity to ask the panelists the second question, which is the greatest challenge or the greatest obstacle? You can pick and choose what you want. Right now, from your perspective, and I start with Steve here. What is the greatest challenge or obstacle right now that you see here?
Well, you know, when I think of this, I think of the millions of people who have been in discussions like we are now. All have had some solutions to come up with, and the brightest brains in the world have been dealing with this issue, and still we are in a never-ending story, and we are more stuck now than ever. So I think what Björn Rosengren, I think it was, who said...
The former minister?
The
former minister in Sweden?
No, the one who reads the lost land, the lost country.
Yeah.
Björn Rosengren. Okay. He said, "Now we have been discussing this for about 65 years, and we haven't come up with a solution. We have to think new. I think we need new ideas." Robert Schuller, one of the preachers who is well known in the United States, says, "A new idea is simple, it gives stimulation, it is smart, and it is successful." Now, new ideas have to come with new people. The newest people are the young people. The young people, they don't have any prejudices. You may have heard of Billy Graham, who told about 50 years ago, when a family had they moved into a new community, and so one of their kids were out and played with other kids. So when the kid came back, the father said to him, "What was your buddy? Was it black or white?" "I don't know, but I'll find out tomorrow."
Good point.
So new people, they don't think about that. They have no prejudices. I think we have to start with the new people, with the young people. You have to order camps or whatever, schools, bring together young people from both parties. And I think I've heard somewhere, but I don't remember when it was now, that I've heard of this, that they brought young people together.
There are many different initiatives
in Israel.
Like that.
I think we have to start with that.
All right.
Some smart people can come up with solutions.
Thank you. Per, what would you say? Main obstacles or challenge?
I think that there are two parties in conflict, and the compromise is required. There is no democracy in Palestine, which I think is a big problem. That anti-Semitism is growing.
Where? Everywhere.
Everywhere. I think. Then there is no negotiation going on, as you said in your lecture. There is no one who has the will and the capacity to negotiate peace.
Is that true even for Israel?
There's no one that has the will or the capacity to
Yeah.
do that. There's no one.
Oh, thank you.
And then there is no apparent solution.
It sounds like a statement. All right, thank you, Per. Fred, what would you say are the main obstacles or challenges that you identify?
Well, I would say we need to find a platform from where we can talk about peace. Right now it's really hard to talk about peace.
What do you mean by platform?
A platform from where you can take it, like a stage. I mean, talking about peace right now is very hard because of the situation, how it is. Because there's a lot of things you have to do before going to the peace talks, I would say. Like, it's hard to talk about peace when things happen, like what happened in Gaza this summer. It's really hard to talk about peace. It's hard to talk about peace when Palestinians live under blockade, occupation, and Israeli, what I consider apartheid. So it's really hard to talk about peace right now. So we need to find a platform from where we can take it to talking about peace. Because otherwise, I can't really see.
This is the destroying Palestinian houses. This is the most obstacle in the peace process.
All right, thank you. We have heard that it's so hard to talk about peace in the conflict. Is it hard or difficult to report or talk about it from your perspective as a journalist?
It is challenging.
Can you develop that?
Well, I hardly need to develop it. I mean, everyone knows the sensitivities, the historical sensitivities, the strong feelings far outside this region, about this region. And so you will always almost be accused of one thing or another. I don't find it really difficult, but I know how sensitive it is, and you have to be aware of that all the time.
One time, this is a quite funny story. One time when I was in Swedish television on Aktuellt, I asked the producer afterwards, which are the issues that you get most complaints about? And he said, well, as you know, it's your topic, Israel, Palestine, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, everything related to integration and racism in Sweden. That is like number one in one big pack. I said, okay, what's number two? He said, you know what? It's the wolves. That might just be a bit off.
I'm happy not to be reporting on this.
All right. The third question that we are going to discuss here is the recognition by the Swedish government of Palestine, which happened last year. And I start at the far end here with Fayek. Was it a right decision? Was it the right decision of the Swedish government to do? What do you think will be the implications of that?
I think it is the right step on the right way. And it is very good that the Swedish government took this decision to confess the state of Palestine. But I think it is not enough. It should be completed to force Israel to draw from the West Bank. And it should be, for example, with the sanction campaign, to let Israel withdraw from the West Bank and to force them to lift the blockade against Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred? what would you say about the Swedish recognition?
I would say it's very good, and
Is it important as well?
it is important because if we want a two-state solution to begin with, at least, we need to recognize Palestine. Israel is already there, so we need a Palestine. So to have that, we have to recognize Palestine. So I think it's really important that we.
You think that more countries will follow?
I think so. There's been signs of it. There's been not officially recognitions of Palestine, but we've seen debates, we've seen votes. So I think it's a very positive statement.
Thank you. Per, what would you say?
Well, many of us didn't think that it was such a good thing to recognize Palestine, but now we simply hope that she will be successful.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to add something?
One of the big challenges in Palestine, I think, is the corruption. And I think that there should have been a condition if we, as a nation, recognize Palestine. There should be a condition that you have to deal with this and this and this. So there could be some pressure on the Palestinians.
And you think about corruption, democracy, dissidents?
Hamas, for example, how they, Hamas and Fatah, how they, if they have to cooperate. And if we hand out a lot of money now, but half of it goes in corruption, what will be the result? I think we in the Western world we're used to deal with people in an honest way, so to say. So, but when you know that the other party hands out half of all the aid to different, for example, to those who are in jail, to those who, like Abbas himself, he is said to take out about 8 million crowns a month, which, I mean, people, the money could be used in a much better way. So I think the basic fault that the Swedish government made was not to put a condition to the aid.
I meant
recognition, I mean, they didn't put a condition to the recognition of.
All right, thanks. I meant the recognition got a lot of attention in Swedish media and internationally, and a lot of criticism in Israel. Do you feel that it was an historic event in some way?
There's a couple of things you can say about that recognition, and one is, which I think is the potentially future important thing about it, and which I think is also the reason in many ways for the harsh Israeli reaction, and that is that this recognition, Sweden may be the first Western European EU country to recognize, but it does reflect a growing public opinion and also frustration and irritation and lack of patience among Western European governments with this Israeli government's politics.
So it's a side against Israel that things are bad.
Yes, and it was interesting because a couple of months ago there was an Israeli a conference with Israeli ambassadors, and Foreign Minister Lieberman was there saying Western Europe is Israel's big diplomatic challenge for the foreseeable future. And the Palestinian sources say that they have signals that there are other countries kind of on standby. This is what Israeli and American diplomats say too. And we'll see, I think, perhaps after the election, depending on what government we get in Israel in March and how the future of settlement building, there may be other recognitions. And in that case, of course, this will have been if not a historic step, but a starting of a trend.
Thank you. All right, the last question is where we will be in 25 years if we meet here. What will happen to the conflict, to the region? quite short answer from you to start with. What do you think? What happened?
Sir, can I just interrupt? How long have we been going on? It seems like we've been going a bit fast. Is it possible to ask questions between us, or?
Yeah, well, the thing is that if you want, we can open up now for the whole discussion, if you like, because we're about to have a panel for about half an hour.
Yeah,
so
I was just so interested in where you got the information about his salary, and also that. Is it okay if I ask these questions?
Please do it afterwards, because I feel that my time is almost out.
Sure.
Or if anyone in the audience would like to ask it, that would be. I mean, shall we open up for questions? I think that's because people seem to be eager to ask. We skipped that 25 years. I should say the reason why I won't allow the questions is because there might be a lot of questions back and forth between. Then the whole thing would be, sorted out afterwards. All right, so we take questions of 3 and 3, and you can either now we say a couple of important things. Say your name and ask a short question. This is not a time for long political statements. So I mean, a short and clear question. Either direct it to somebody in the panel, or to a couple of people, or to everybody, or whatever. But short question. Otherwise, I'll cut you off. Sorry about it. Quite brutal. And you will pick out the people who can.
Yeah. Take the other microphone. Could you turn off the question maybe without the microphone?
So, my name is Edward, and I have a question concerning the situation outside of Israel and Palestine. I would like to ask about the situation in Egypt, foremost to you as the
To me?
Yes, the political scientist.
Okay.
And also to the other ones. What do you see with Sisi in Egypt coming up now, becoming more powerful? Do you see anything changing toward Israel, the relationship Egypt-Israel?
Good question. Thank you. We'll take 2 more. You can pick up whoever you want.
Hi, my name is Rafaela. I would like a question for Stig. You brought up the corruption in Palestine. I would like, considering that the biggest news this 2013 was the corruption in Israel, I would like to hear the corruption scandals. I'd like to have a comment on that, why that isn't a problem for the peace process, for example. So just a comment on the corruption in Israel.
Thank you. One more. This one.
Hello. My name is Mahmoud Shinino. I'm a Palestinian refugee who has never been to Palestine. I was deported at the Tel Aviv airport last year when I was a child to visit my homeland. First thing, Palestine is under occupation and are suffering under an apartheid.
We'll get to the questions.
State, yeah. And you can't talk about democracy when you're under occupation, first of all. Then Palestine, I think that no one has the capacity or the will to make a change or to make peace. And Stig said we need new ideas. I'm asking you to please tell me what Israel wants for Palestine. Nobody has ever answered that question.
But that was a good question. We'll take that. I'm sorry, we cannot allow longer statements. All right, you have 2 questions, Stig. Or maybe Perry, if you want to help, that would be all right. So shall I start with you if you want to start? Feel free to start.
I started with the question of the corruption and the peace. I mean, in order to have a discussion and to have a dialogue, you have to be honest. And if you don't know that what you say will be dealt with in an honest way, it's very hard to arrange the peace. Does it make sense to you? No. No, overall, this is overall. Yeah, I mean, in order to get a dialogue, you have to be fair in all your discussion. And we know that there has been a lot of aid going on to the Palestinians that has been dealt with, so it hasn't been used for what it was meant to be used for. Because the money was used in a different way. So if you can't rely on that, there is no use to continue a process and a dialogue. For example, if you use the money that is meant to be building up factories, producing things, starting selling things, and if the money instead is used for different things, to combat Israel, then how can you continue a peace process and a dialogue?
Would you like to respond to the young man who asked the question about what Israel wants for Palestine? Either you, Steve, or if your take is...
What borders? I'm talking borders.
Borders? Yeah. Okay. For anyone, would you like to?
Well, for us, we think the important thing is that we have two parties, and that we have to try to find peace between them. And that's the idea, that if we want to have some peace, we have to have a dialogue and discuss. Otherwise, we won't get any peace.
But you're asking Hamas, for example, what do you want for Palestine? What do you want? And we're asking the same thing. What does Israel want? And we don't get any answer. And you have the capacity. Hamas does not have the capacity to make peace. But Israel does. But they never say what they want. They just fight.
All right. We take it. We let Per respond to that quite briefly, and then I take my question if you want to.
No. I have nothing more to say on that question.
Yeah,
no.
Then I'll take the Egypt question. I've been to Egypt a couple of times, and many of my friends are experts in Egypt. I'm not an expert in Egypt myself. I should say that. But I follow the situation quite closely, and I mean, I think it's a very difficult and dangerous development there. The people I talk to say that the military regime is very brutal, and even more brutal than the previous regimes, which were brutal as well. And if you take the parallel that I referred to in the early 1980s, when a lot of political Islamists were jailed and exiled, I mean, that led to a lot of trouble in the decades ahead, and I think it's reasonable to believe that we will see something similar here. I mean, the struggle between the regime and the Muslim Brotherhood is a very long struggle. I mean, it's been going on for 90 years or so, little less. And my answer would be that the final word has not been said yet, that we will see more. And Egypt is the most important country for the Arab world culturally, and the largest with population. They are facing a lot of problems when it comes to economy, to the environment. That's one factor that people might forget, Environmental factors are drivers here for the conflicts. The lack of water, the drought in Syria is one of the structural factors behind the war there. I don't have time to go more into that, but environmental factors. Egypt has a very difficult situation when it comes to water, for example. I stop there because I want a new round of questions, so please take 3 more.
Hello, my name is Arvid. My question is mainly to you that we kind of know that there are some who supports the Palestinian side and some that doesn't. And regards to those who do, my question is, can you see a one-state solution as a solution that can give Palestinians civil rights instead of trying to achieve a two-state solution that it's not the case anymore because Israel has controlled all of Palestine for so long? Isn't it better to focus on a one-state solution where everybody has the same rights?
Thank you.
My name is Nabil Samsour, and the question to Farid. Why the question about refugee is important and where is they stayed? Thank you.
Can you repeat again what you said? I didn't hear what you said.
Hi. I asked Hayek about refugee, why it is important question for him, and where live the refugee and how many are there.
Thank you. I will be very brief, but first off, thank you for the presentation and to the panel. My name is Saskia Pantel. I am the General Secretary of the Zionist Federation here in Sweden. And I wanted to just very briefly answer your question what Israel wants.
Thanks.
Israel wants peace.
But can you do it after?
Yeah, I'm getting to it.
Yeah.
Really, I understand your situation definitely.
Sorry.
But it has to do with my question, actually, which is to Mr. Faik about the refugee problem. Because this also goes, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Anders.
Anders, your first presentation, in the beginning when you spoke about the first war, you said 1948 and you said it's the beginning of the Palestinian refugee problem and birth of the Palestinian refugee situation. Now, however, there's something that's missing, and that's the Jewish refugees from Arab countries. There were 900,000 Jews that were kicked out from Arab land. So, my question is, if you want to have the right of return, you say you're a refugee, Palestinian refugee. I live in Israel. I came from Israel yesterday.
Wrap up, come on.
I am.
Yeah, sorry. I don't want to be rude to people, but...
Really, you missed a lot of things in the presentation, and I think it's very important to have this part of it.
Yeah, but you mean,
Let
just
me
one
finish.
question, I'm sorry.
If you let me finish, I'll get to my point. My point is that this is an impossibility. There's 5 million Palestinian refugees. So what is the solution with UNRWA? How come UNRWA is keeping Palestinians being refugees as inherited refugee status? You're a refugee. That's crazy. It shouldn't be that way. The goal of the world should be for the other part of the UN to have refugees not be refugees anymore. So how is this going to be a solution as long as we have UNRWA? As long as we have aid going to UNRWA, and if you were in Gaza this summer, I'm sure that you saw a lot of UN schools that were targeted because Hamas was shooting from there.
I was working there, and no, Hamas were not there. I was working with the UN, so sorry, no, I didn't see Hamas.
We can answer the questions now. So we have a couple of questions for many of them were directed to you again. Fred can fill in as well.
First, about the refugee in the war, it is about 6 million refugee Palestinian. It is spread in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and the West Bank and Gaza, and in different European countries and all over the world. And a lot of them, they're eager to come to their homeland, which they were driven out from Palestine in 1948. I mean, about the Jews, which they were driven from the Arabic world, we would like for them to come to their homelands in Arabic world. For example, I met Latif Douri. It is a very famous Jewish activist. He was with them in the parliament. He said to me, if it is possible for me to go back to Baghdad, I am ready to come back to Baghdad. He don't want to stay in Palestine because he was forced of the Zionist movement, which they get bombs in Israeli synagogue.
That is a lie.
This is what happened. This is what happened. It is the same thing in Morocco.
You must allow to speak. You must allow to speak. I'm sorry.
Yeah, in Morocco also the Zionist movement, they throw bombs in Israeli synagogue to spread anti-Semitism, to force Jewish from the Arabic world to travel to Palestine. This is what happened. And we are against it. We are against anti-Semitism. It is very important to declare this. It is very important that what happened in the Holocaust, we are against. We want Jews to be dealt as usual citizens here in Europe, not to go to Palestine, to leave their home countries here. Because we consider Jewish as a religion, not as a people. Thank you.
Would you like to add something, Efra?
Well, yes. I can tell you that I've been working at a lot of schools. I work with kids there that had PTSD from earlier Israeli aggressions against Gaza. And no, I have not seen Hamas. Actually, I only met someone from Hamas once because they act as a ghost during the war. You can't see them at all, basically. And no, there was no one from Hamas, or the military wing, Al-Qassam, at the young schools that I've been working at, nor at the mosques, nor in the civilian buildings next to me that's been attacked, nor at the civilian hospital where I self got splinters from an Israeli shell that got attacked for 16 hours. There were only civilians at this hospital. 2 hospitals I've been at that has been attacked by Israeli occupation forces with only civilians. So I don't see what you're talking about here. Have you been to Gaza?
I spent the summer in a bomb shelter in Yafa.
And you
I
survived?
went out into Gaza because I'm Jewish.
Yeah, the same for Gazans.
What?
I think we need to move on. If you want, you can continue this discussion afterwards. I'm sure you have a lot to talk about. Can we take another round of questions?
Hi, my name is Ben. It's less controversial than the first one. It's just a question about the recent effect of attacks on Jewish communities in Europe and how that will affect Netanyahu sort of using it almost as a recruitment for Jews to move to Israel, and how that will affect the conflict there, either to Agneta or Anders.
Thank you so much for organizing that seminar. My name is Mohammed Al-Jalawi, Palestinian from Gaza Strip. I just want to mention 2 points. I'm going to answer about the challenge from Mr. Beer and Mr. Steve. They suggest 2 points about the hope of the new generation to start to peace process. But I'm saying to you, as a Palestinian youth, you're not giving any chance. You don't give any chance to Palestinian youth to cross the border, at least to build the peace built on justice. You are just mentioning peace, but peace is not built on justice.
So what is the question? Sorry.
The question is that Mr. Beale mentioned Palestinian. No, they don't have a democracy and they don't do the nominations. All the Palestinian Authority offer all the nominations, and Israel always say, well, okay, we will see. But they don't offer anything.
You need to come to the question now, otherwise.
The last thing is, just I wanted to mention about, we could not compare about, as the lady said, about as a Jewish could not enter Gaza. Lots of delegations from all over the world. We are not against Jews.
Your time is up.
We are against the Zionists.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the time is up.
That's you, because that you are a great actor when you mentioned about your propaganda. All what you said.
We are going to listen to another question. Sorry.
So, I see lots of men dealing with this problem. I see lots of men there in the board. I would like to ask Mrs. Romberg, what is the role of the females in Gaza, in Israel, and in the other world? What can we do?
Yeah, very good question, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. We have had 3 questions now. We here have a bit difficult sometimes to hear what the questions really are about. There was a question here. They're directed to about you said Netanyahu's statements about Jews that they should move to Israel from Jewish communities in Europe.
About the tax as well and how that will affect
Tax?
The tax.
Tax, yeah, the tax. Okay. Would any one of you like to answer the question? Or shall I take it? I understood the question. I can take it. It is seen as controversial when the Israeli leaders are saying to people that to youth that they should move to Israel. It was seen as very controversial. I mean, on the one hand, if you ask the spokesperson for the Israeli embassy in Stockholm, he would say that it's Netanyahu's job to stimulate Jewish immigration to Israel. On the other hand, if you look, for example, at the reactions in Copenhagen last week, there were a lot of members of the Jewish community there that felt a bit ambivalent about Netanyahu's statement and said that the place of the Danish Jews should be Denmark, for example. So I think you have both support and criticism against that. And criticism in Israel too, of course. Yeah. All right, there was a question about. Would you like to comment to what the gentleman up there said? Otherwise, we'll move on to the question about women. I'll direct that to you, Agneta. The role of women.
Yes, I was trying to think. It's hard to say. It's a male environment to a large extent. One of the conditions that the Swedish government wanted to have on the Palestinian Authority actually was precisely that: more women in sort of top positions in all parts of Palestinian society. And Mahmoud Abbas said that they would work on that. I mean, there are always, we're talking about platforms and people meeting, and there have been these platforms, often done by women, for as long as I've been in the Middle East. People meeting, peace camps, and they are wonderful. They haven't led anywhere.
So no impact?
Very little on the large. I mean, they used to be before the PLO and Israel recognized each other. There were people from both sides, quite often women actually from both sides, meeting elsewhere in Stockholm, Copenhagen, Tokyo, you name it. And it kind of became this, somebody called it the traveling circus. The people already talk to each other, go on talking to each other, but it doesn't spread. And I think there has been a women's role in a lot of this. It hasn't really got anywhere.
All right.
I would like to comment.
Yeah, please.
I mean, about the Palestinians, really, the Palestinian Authority, there is a lot of people, women, they are in minister post. The women in the Palestinian struggle, it is shared with the man from the beginning of 70s. There we have a lot of members in the Palestinian National Council. So the woman role, it is very high in Palestine.
Much higher than in most surrounding countries.
Yes.
Actually, at least in the West Bank.
So this is a reality.
Can you say anything about the role of women in Israel? Would you say compare? Do you have anything to say about?
No.
No, nothing to add. All right. Another round of questions. There are many hands today, so people are eager to ask questions.
Hi, my name is Rebecca.
Please.
Palestine and Israel, and I'm asking a question about the war. So what's your opinion about it, especially in Chile, maybe? But on one hand, it has prevented about 96% of the suicide attacks, but on the other hand, it prevents lots of people from living human lives. So your opinion about it?
Hello, thank you for an interesting lecture. My name is Harold. My question is about the re-election to Parliament in Israel, now in March. How will this affect, or maybe affect, the relation between Palestine and Israel?
My name is Bassam. My question about the Palestinian state. Many knows that without the international support, Israel couldn't be created.
Without the international support?
Yes, in the beginning. First was the English mandate, the division claim of FN, the support and military and financial support, big financial and military support from the West Wall. Do you believe that without international support, can a Palestinian state be created?
You mean international support for Israel or for Palestine?
For Palestine, to
Okay.
solve the problem.
Yeah.
For the
Okay.
world was very, very engaged in the
All right.
problem from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
Then after the Israeli creation, no one as like engaged as before. It's okay for them.
Thank you. We had the first question was about the wall or the barrier. Anyone from Per or Steve would like to say something about the wall or the barrier?
About
the wall or the barrier, the separation barrier.
Okay.
It has many names. You know. Separation barrier, wall, and security fence. You can pick whatever.
I think they were built because they need support from people in the other who were terrorists, according to the Israeli people. So they needed the walls to get that.
Fred and Fayek, would you like to say something about?
Yes, I would love to. I mean, first we had communism versus capitalism, and now we have democracy versus terrorism. And it's so funny that you point out that this is a wall against like terrorism. I mean, basically, I believe myself that the wall in Berlin just moved to Palestine, basically. And I believe it's an apartheid wall, really. It's a separation barrier. And it doesn't follow the Green Line either, the 1967 borders, which is, I mean, come on, even that's really problematic.
In my classes on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we have this as an example of different languages we use, and that the way we use language is important for discourse. The term you will read in the Swedish press is a barrier. On the Palestinian side, it's often a part of the wall, as I pointed out. The Israelis will call it a security fence, and it matters which term you use. And that's true for many aspects of this conflict. The second question was about this Israeli election, right? Anyone who would like to take on that, or shall I take it?
What was the question?
There was about the impact of the Israeli election on the peace process, or
on the relation in the peace process and the relation at all.
Okay, Fred, you seem to be eager.
No, not really. But I mean, I would love to see a different government in Israel. Right now, it's an extreme right. I would love to see more center or left one. I believe that could lead to a lot of good results in conflict. Because the extreme right there's a lot of hatred, and that we will just get more and more hatred out of this. And I believe the left, at least, will be able to have good talks with the Palestinians.
And the third question was about the international support for the Palestinian state. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Yeah.
The importance of international support?
It is naturally, it is very important to have international support to get the Palestinian state. But also at the same time, our struggle will help to build this state from our side and from Arabic side. All these supports, it is very necessary to help us to reach our targets to build this democratic state. That all democratic state in the whole Palestine. There is Muslims, Christians and Jewish live side by side. I think this on the long run will function to eliminate from this conflict, that all refugees should come back to their homes and one man, one vote. This is the solution. We'll get real peace in the area on the long term.
We have time for one more round of questions, so 3 more questions. Otherwise, I think perhaps you can come forward and ask. So you can ask me or some of the panelists if you like. But we have to the orders I've been given is to break a day. So now we have a dilemma. Try to pick people that haven't asked questions.
Hi, my name is Andreas, and I was wondering if this conflict is really about religion or just hurt people lashing out.
So hurt people?
Hurt people who are lashing out at each other.
All right. Thank you.
Good question.
I can't express myself in English, but if somebody can...
Yeah, I'm sure I can translate it if you need.
Ni pratar om gränser, om bosättningar, om muren. Israel har return of the law of return, för bara judar. Förra året var jag i besök som svensk och stod framför mitt hus i Galileen.
You have to get to the point again, I'm sorry that I'm take fascist.
Sedan 48 är det ockuperat. Nu bor det en amerikansk jude i mitt hus. Nu är det min fråga. Har jag rätt? Och jag vill att panelen säger ja eller nej. Har jag rätt? Plus miljoner flyktingar, palestinier. Enligt israeliska lagen, return of the law, att återvända till mitt hem.
All right, thank you.
Hey, mitt namn är Matilda Brolin. Sorry, in English. As you've written your PhD on the EU's role in the conflict, I was wondering what you and also maybe Agneta thinks about the EU's future role and what EU can do in this conflict.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, we can't take more. We have enough ammunition here. Start by religion. What's the role of religion in the conflict? Anyone that would like to start? Parents?
I don't think this is a mainly a religious question. It's a conflict.
But has the religion become more important, in recent years? Steve, can I say something?
My hearing is so bad. I don't hear what they say.
Okay. Then Fayyad
for us as Palestinians, really, about religion. Naturally, the majority of Palestinians are Muslims. But as a tradition, we lived side by side with the Christians and the Jewish together without any problems before. And if we look in the history, for example, a lot of Palestinians from the Christian belonging, they are leaders in the PLO. Not at least George Habash, Gamal Nasser, a lot of them, they were in PLO Executive Committee. At the same time, we have some members in the Palestinian National Council, as Orivneri, they are Jewish, they are members in the Palestinian National Council. So we don't have any problem as a religious problem, really.
Okay.
It is not religious conflict.
I would slightly disagree there and make the argument that religion has become more important in recent years. I mean, all the people, as you said, that founded either the PLO or the Zionist movement were secular, but today many of the dominant figures are religious. So I think you can make the argument both ways here. The question the gentleman was asking whether he had the right to return to his home in the Galilee, and he wanted the whole panel to answer that. Would parents, would you like to say something about that?
I think it's very difficult to include so many people from Palestinians to come back to Israel. I think it would be very difficult.
Only Jews?
Pardon?
Only Jews who have right to return?
Well, they are that. Oh, yes.
That was a clear answer. Fred
No.
and Fayed?
Yeah, really, well, this is very strange. Because you can, for example, Jew from Russia, from Poland, they have the right to come tomorrow to Palestine, and they live there as usual citizenship. They take Israeli citizenship tomorrow, they can do it. But for me, which coming from Tarshiha, it is a city in Akka. My relatives, they are still living there. We can't, even we are, my relatives, it is about 10 kilometers from the Palestinian borders. We can't just visit our village in Palestine. It is fair, this, you think? It is a lot of Palestinians living in refugee camps. They can't come back to their home. And the one which he has nothing to do, he has no history with the country. From Russia, or from Poland, or from Hungary, or Jewish from Sweden. What he has to do with Palestine?
Fred, would you like to have a final word, Fred?
Yeah.
On the refugee question.
On the refugee question. Well, it's a very complex question. I mean, it could be that if 5 million of refugees would go to Israel and try to take, I don't know how to practically do it, like take back their homes, or it would be like, maybe it would be like a new Nakba, like it would start over again. We need to find a solution where Palestinians can return, but it's a very complex question. I mean, people are living in these houses now. They're new houses. Some houses are not even there anymore. So we need to find a solution that fits everyone, where Palestinians can move back and Israelis can still live there, I believe.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to take the final question. I'm sorry. The final question was about the role of the EU, and I forgot a question that was directed to me previously, whether a one-state solution would work. I think no, it will be civil war. The question of what the EU can do is a question that resembles Sigmund Freud's legendary question of what a woman wants. But to make this is what I'm doing in my research. To make a long story short, there are increasing signs that they are going to be much tougher against Israel. To make a long story short, and to use various forms of contractual agreements as sticks rather than carrots against Israel, especially related to the settlements. I think that the EU will separate out the settlements for different kind of punitive measures while keeping full, normal, even expanded contacts with Israel. They recognize Israel within the 1967 borders. That's the short answer. With that, the time is up. I thank the panelists for a great discussion, great question. I thank you, the audience. I must say it's easier to do it here in the middle of Sweden than in the south of Sweden. I must say that, so I'm quite happy that it went so well, that a lot of questions were asked, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Men lycka till, vad kul att träffa dig. Nej, jag ska åka till nästa vecka. Ja, fast jag känner faktiskt Cecilia det när jag ska göra program. Ja, det måste jag testa. Jag har faktiskt inte varit kvar på varför jag inte har varit med på samtal. Jag bara... Senaste gången var där. Så det... Och så kommer de att öka iväg och så kommer det